Welcome all to my Did I Break Prod presentation, and I can tell you already that I did, probably more than once. And also, the way I felt when I was afraid that I did is kind of how I feel now, so bear with me. I'll start by very shortly explaining to you who I am, why am I speaking today. Then a brief story of my difficult experience with software development. A little bit of improvement with transforming from ClearCase to Git and what followed. And why I believe there is something that can be improved. What's the problem I'm seeing? And then I'll try to show you an idea how to solve the problem I'm talking about. So, my name is Ewelina Wilkosz. I started working in IT as a web developer. Then I moved to embedded software. And after that, I had many years of fun as a CI/CD consultant. Now I work at Costly as DevOps engineer with a focus on customer success. So making sure that the tools people are using are doing some good things for them is very close to my heart. But yeah, enough about me. Well, not really, because this is a story about me. But let's move to the point of this presentation. I started working as a software developer in embedded software around 2010. And development by then looked very different than it looks now. Or at least that's what I think. I realized, especially after working for a lot of different customers as a consultant, that there are companies that are much behind, and there are companies, maybe some of you are probably ahead of what I'm showing you now. And if you have some experiences or comments or ideas, I'm very happy to hear them after the presentation. But yeah, here is the story. The product I worked with was just a tiny little bit of piece that I was developing with my team. And this part this piece was a part of one module. This module, together with a bunch of other modules, was forming a sub-module. And you can see the question marks, I hope, in the other modules. They are there to represent how little I knew about what's going on in the little corner of the software I was working with. We were using ClearCase, which I still consider you need some special magic powers to be able to fully understand. It wasn't easy for me to understand what my colleagues were doing until I moved on to develop another tiny piece in one of their subsystems. And there was a lot of subsystems like that, and all of them together formed a big product. And that only brings much more question marks. So it was fairly difficult to see the impact of my code on the final product. It was impossible for me to know at that time at which stage of the software development process my changes were. Everything was taking ages to build, and even if something was failing in the integration test of the whole product, I couldn't tell if it was me because I didn't understand what my colleagues were implementing at the same time and which of their changes ended up in a specific version with mine. So that wasn't very comfortable, but the trickiest part was that I never knew when my changes went live. And that's what caused me this biggest scare of my career so far. I'm not done yet. So the tiny little feature I was working on was part of, let's call it functionality X. And months after me and my colleagues considered our work done and delivered, which at that time went for us committed to ClearCase, because that's all we knew. There was black wall behind it for us. We read in the news about the major failure of functionality X at a major customer in a big country. And it was, cold sweat immediately. Was it us? Was it me? There was no way for us to know. Maybe that's not really true, but with the knowledge and access we had at the time, we really had no idea, no possibility to tell which version was running when the failure happened and if our code was a part of that version. So it was virtually impossible to know. Actually, I still don't know. But no one came after us, so I'm assuming we're good. Not every feature I implemented caused me so much stress, but for each, I had the same amount of understanding about where it is after I committed it, which was basically no understanding at all. And the thing that drives me at work really is feeling I'm making a change, hopefully for the better, for the final user, whoever this final user is. And if I don't know what happens with my code after it leaves my machine, I can't really tell if I'm doing anything good or right, good or wrong, and it takes a lot of joy away. But things were changing, sometimes for the better. A few years after I started working at this company, an exciting news has arrived. We're switching from ClearCase to Git. And my first reaction was like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. It was a heavily scripted way of working based on ClearCase. It was a massive code base. I couldn't really believe that it's going to work. And then it worked, and it just happened. Not overnight, of course. There was a lot of planning, figuring out new ways of working, a lot of education to all my colleagues and myself. And since I was involved in figuring out those new ways of working and providing trainings after some trainings were provided to me, it was just the most fun I had at work for a long time. So I was like, oh, okay, work can be fun again. So suddenly we have the central Git repository. Was easily accessible, and we could easily compare versions of our code. We could see the timeline when they happen. We can easily see what other changes were introduced with our changes by other teams. We had tags and branches, which made very easy for us to check which version our change became a part of. And once I got more familiar with Git, I could access most of that information from my terminal, which was often a part of my development tool. So I just had one window and I had it all there. Jenkins showed up in our landscape, so that provided us the information not only about where our code is, but also how it's doing. Is it building? Is it integrating? And there was a lot of other additional tools and services that, for example, QA teams were using that was providing or was able to provide much more feedback about the state of the changes. So before that transition, my developer horizon kind of ended here, where my laptop ends. And suddenly I can see much further because I can see what's happening with my code after all the way to the central repository. And automatically my horizon, since I kind of moved back, becomes wider, and I can see the changes that are being introduced by other people, how they fit or don't, and how it all works together. So, new world and new challenges. Because we were showered with new tools, and becoming familiar with them was tiring, difficult, or sometimes impossible. It wasn't always clear where to access certain information or services. Like, I heard about some tool that my colleagues were using, but it was so many new things, it was very difficult to just have a central place where I could learn about what's where. And even if I knew, I didn't always have access rights to read certain data. So troubleshooting and kind of getting a little bit a bigger picture became easier, or maybe more possible, but still required patience and sometimes playing Sherlock to put all those pieces together. And then someone came up with the idea of collecting all this information and displaying the information from different sources in one place. One easily accessible place that was just like self-explanatory how to read it and provided with links to different services that were providing the data that was displayed. So we could see information from Git, we could see information from Jenkins, and I can only speak for myself, really, but I do got the impression that a lot of my colleagues felt similar at the time. We did became we did become much more engaged, because like suddenly this code that we implemented existed after we pushed it. I mean, we weren't delusional, we knew that it existed, but we couldn't really see how it's performing, where it is, and suddenly it's there. There wasn't much blaming game. I often feel a little bit anxious when the idea of certain metrics or visualization is introduced, like suddenly everyone will see the red tick next to my commit. It wasn't that like that at all. We just like our developer world became bigger, and the impact our changes were making was much more visible, and it did become more fun. But it's still only a part of the story. I knew more or less how my code is performing, in which state it is, which confidence level did it get to a functional test or integration test. It still wouldn't be possible for me to tell if I'm the one who broke the product on the other side of the world, because my horizon kind of finished maybe just a little bit further behind the Git repository. So the missing piece of the story is knowing if and where the software I built is actually running. And it doesn't matter if it's a simple web app or maybe a massive online banking service. I want to know whenever I implement a feature, is it running anywhere? So I can click around and see in staging environment, or maybe already in production, if the changes are introduced are working the way I intended it. Or was it running a week ago when there was this major failure? And is it me, or do I have to hide under my desk, or what? And from my experience, and I'm speaking from a developer perspective, that information is the hardest one to get, because it requires ops knowledge that not everyone has. I have a little bit maybe, and then in a year I learn I know nothing, because everything moved so fast in different directions. Yeah, not everyone has the knowledge, and often those runtimes environments are heavily protected for a reason, of course. So not everyone is allowed in. So how are we supposed to know? Well, we just have to start cooperating. It really boils down to that, even if it sounds a little bit banal, to start talking to people that have access and understanding of these different tools that are available in the development environment. And explain to each other what information is valuable to you and why do you need that information, so you can figure out how to visualize it the best way. And then automation, like all the information or most of the information that could answer those questions I had in my head, provide the information that I'm hoping I'm being clear how useful I find this information. That information is there. You just need to decide at which point and by what means you collect the information. And once you actually have those different pieces of the information, you are halfway home. You just need to find this final thing which is connecting all the dots. So what I'm hoping I'm gonna show you something, and what I'm hoping I'm gonna pass over to you is an idea how to implement systems that can let you move on from a place where you have the specific history of your changes in your code, but not as specific history of your artifacts built by your pipelines or your environments, to the point where you actually can see how the artifacts are changing and trace them easily back to the source code, and how your environments, and by that I mean which version of the software is running, how it connects to specific artifacts that are connected to code changes. And that brings us to this promised demo. It's a proof of concept. It's not a working product. And I had great ambition at first, but then I realized that each one of us probably is interested in different information and different data. But I will try to show you how you can extract, save, and present the data that, for example, for me, from this developer perspective, someone who wants to know if she broke the prod or not, how to do it. It's based on Bash scripts, and I'm not great at Bash. I managed to create something, so I believe they are not very complicated, but of course it's just the tool I chose. If you want to do something like that on a big scale, you probably want to use something more efficient. And I also rely on JSON files that at some point would grow so big that also efficiency would be the problem. But you know, once you have the idea and what and how you want to connect, then sky is the limit. So now I have to do a little bit of change with my display, because I really need to see what I'm showing to you. And displays. So I have a little project with the Docker file. I have, I won't stop on the things that are really not important here. I have a make file that I used to build my Docker and then my Docker image, then push it. I have a little deploy target that deploys my Docker image to Kubernetes cluster, and it's running there. And we really don't care what's in this Docker image. We just care about producing new versions of it. And you're going to see how it's changing at times. And then I have a bunch of scripts. One of the first scripts that I use to collect the data that I can later use to display the information that I find very interesting is this report build. So whenever I build and push a Docker image, I report build by extracting information about the image name and the git commit that was used to build this specific image, and the digest that I use Docker inspect command to extract. And then I create a JSON file with that information. So it's image, commit, digest, and then I have a test field, because I want to be able to tell if my code was tested or not. We'll get back to that in a second. So in a make file, whenever I push my Docker image to registry, I also report that I built it. This is all on my local machine. I didn't want to risk that GitHub will be down and I will be standing here stressing and sweating. But all of these things, as I mentioned before, can be automated one way or another, depending on whatever system you want to use. For now, I just made it part of push, and I think I just, no, sorry, that's not it. I have a very complicated post-commit hook that I hope this is big enough. Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. That I just run those two targets. I build, every time I commit, I automatically build and publish and report artifacts. The fact that I have built a Docker image, and by that I mean I create a JSON file. In a more sophisticated system, that would be recording it in a database, for example. And we have a very simple data there. So let's make a change. That's going to be just an empty line that I add. Commit message has to explain exactly what I'm doing, so there it is. I do have a couple of artifacts already recorded from before. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 artifacts. So now I'm gonna commit, and post-commit hook kicks in. I'm kind of simulating it happening in the CI. So my image is built, it's gonna be published, and when it's published, the build will be reported. And the commit SHA, the latest commit that I have created now, starts with db239. So let's see what's in my code, in my artifact database. Now I have 8 files, including the db239, which is the information I recorded about the artifact. It's all very basic, but it's a good enough start. I know how the artifact is named, I know the commit it was created from, and I know its digest. When it comes to digest, it's a checksum. It's not some magical weird number. Whenever you build your Docker image and publish it, you can see the digest, for example, in Docker Hub, or you can, as I did, use Docker inspect command to see the digest. And that's an easy way to verify if the thing you're running is the thing that you think you're running. If you change the content, if you replace the Docker image with another Docker image, just try to keep the name, and it goes for the same goes for files or other things. So it's a way to kind of like make sure that it's signed with this number, or not number, but a string that you can't really change without changing the content of the artifact. It's very easy with Docker images, because after you pushed them to registry, you can easily extract that number, but there are ways to calculate that for file. That's pretty straightforward. Maybe a little bit more complicated for folder, but it is doable, and this digest is the key of what I'm doing here, which you'll see soon. And then I have this empty field for test, because I didn't really test yet. So I want to deploy it. So I'm going to run my deploy target. And again, I'm just like always using the latest commit in my make file. So I don't provide the information about which one for the sake of this demo. It's just as simple as take the last one, which is the one I have just created. And when we look at this, no, we don't. So when I publish, when I use the deploy target, the new version, the one that I have built, was deployed to Kubernetes cluster, and it's running there. But how do I know that? I have this record environment script that I run every minute using cron-tab. Again, something that can be done in multiple ways using whatever CI engine you have. My colleagues are using Helm chart to deploy it to Kubernetes cluster. I have no idea how to do that, so I'm not going to pretend that. But what it does is, I'm using kubectl command, and if you're wondering why I'm using the whole path, it's just something that I learned yesterday when I was finishing it. If you use it in a cron tab, sometimes it just can't find the tool that you're using, so it's better to just give it a whole path to the binary. So I just extract the data I'm interested in. I want to know the name of the image. The image that is running. I want to know the namespace it's running it. Oh, sorry, that might be the name of the pod. I'm also not a Kubernetes expert, but yes. The image, where it started running, and the image ID here is the digest of the image that was used to start the container that's currently running. So I extract all that information. This image ID contains some string, blah, 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 SHA-256 : that I have to cut off to just get the digest. And we'll see in a second why it's so important to know this digest. And again, I'm just creating a JSON file that stores all the information about things that are running. And I also check, is this report identical with the last report I got? Because if it is, I don't need to save it. It's still the same thing running in my environment. And as I mentioned, it runs every minute. So I'm fairly sure after this bit of talking I did, it had created a new snapshot. So let's see. I have a list environment script that I'll show you in a second. That's listing all the changes in the environment that were reported by the script I showed you a moment ago. So here I can see that the latest version is on top. It started at, well, it really started at 1402. It's the timestamp I'm getting from the Kubernetes cluster. It's still running now, and it's the version with DB23, which is the commit that I have now. So this thing running there in the background shows me that this is what's running now. And this is already a lot of useful information from me, because as a developer, I have a very easy way of checking what's the commit SHA of the thing that I expected to produce the build. So I can see it now. And also is my change that was built in the version here, something that caused the outage a week ago. And I can see it was only running sometime yesterday until today morning, so it's not me. And it's 2 or 3 little scripts that just this data. There is still no real connection going on. But because I record maybe we can see the snapshot file. I record the name of the image. The name can be changed. I could put the tag with the commit short SHA. That's not really representing the SHA that was built. I'm storing this digest. And this digest is a way for me to see if this thing was actually what I believe it is. Because I can always go back to my artifacts and see if this is something I had built. So I have a script to validate environment that takes the digest from latest image. Takes the digest of the container that is running in an environment. And for the sake of keeping it simple, this validate environment just checks what's running now, the latest report that came, checks the digest, and then it checks if there is an artifact reported with the same digest. And if there is an artifact reported with the same digest, it can also check if the tests are okay. And if you remember, I didn't report any tests because I haven't tested yet. So when I run this validate environment script, it will tell me that this is the image that's running now, which is true. It's the same as the one reported by the other script. This is its digest, and the environment status is not okay. And in my case, I define the status as okay if the tests passed. So tests have passed successfully. So now I'm going to report successful tests, report test script as okay. And the artifact, I'm not moving anything. When I find the artifact that I have built, which was this one, suddenly the test was updated to be okay. And if I validate the environment again, suddenly the environment status is okay. And that's, you probably figured out I didn't really run any tests. And there can be a lot of different things that you want to know that are for you mean this is fine or this is not fine or this is half fine. So you can build your conditions a little bit more complicated. But the bottom line is I have created an entry, a JSON file with a very basic data, and then I can just start adding information on top of that. For example, did I do it like I mentioned in the description of this presentation that one of the things that some of us might be interested is in SBOM. And when we were preparing this, when I was preparing the description of the presentation, SBOMs were really hot, and me and my colleagues were pretty convinced we're gonna implement support for them in our tools. And then we learned more about them, and they are massive. So it's really difficult, and I actually have no answer how to use them in a way that is not killing the performance of your software. But nevertheless, since the same way I have added the test results, you can update the information about your artifacts just using the digest as a like a hook, a way to connect environments, artifacts, and the different evidences you're providing. So there is, I think I made a target to actually build a simple, produce a simple SBOM for this simple Docker image I have built. And this one is actually not that massive. So once I make it, I have this report SBOM script that just attaches the generated SBOM to the latest artifact again to save myself the need to provide the SHA manually. So when we look at this artifact again, we have the information about SBOM here. So you can just put wherever you want, whatever you find useful, whatever you want to be able to search through. And using this digest, that the environments you're using, I think a lot of, if you're using cloud, a lot of services in AWS, their API will return you the digest of the thing that's running there. Digest of a zip folder with the Lambda function you have pushed to your Lambda environment, or the binary file, or a folder with your website. You can get you can either get the digest, the SHA-256, using the API of the service you're using, or you can just calculate it on your own. It all depends on what's the setup there. But it's an easy way of making sure that what you're running is what you believe you're running, and connect the thing you're running to the artifacts you had built. And that way, you can look at the environment and the digest can take you back to an artifact, and an artifact has an information about, I'm tested, here's my SBOM, I failed code coverage, or I didn't, and all is good. And from there, you can go back to the source code because you know the SHA, all depending on the information you're keeping. But the thing that I like the most is the search function. So again, because it's due to keeping the digest both in the information about artifacts and the environments that are running, I can easily connect these things. So I have a search, that's not that top. I have a search script that takes SHA, short SHA, and tells you, hey, I do have an information about artifact produced from that commit. Here is the image of an artifact. Is it running now? No. Was it running previously? Yes. So this is my way of figuring out if I'm the one who broke our online banking 3 weeks ago. I mean, I don't work for online banking. That was just an example. But yeah, and this is. I was really excited preparing this script, so they are like all over the place because I want to add this or that. But they are all simple, and they all rely on the digest and just finding the information. JSON was a nice and easy thing to search and update using JQ. So that's what I went for. But as I mentioned before, if you figure out what you want to see and who can help you get that information, even, for example, if you don't have access to the Kubernetes cluster, and you will never be given access to this Kubernetes cluster, or you don't even want to hear about it because you're not learning Kubernetes, just talk to the person who's maintaining it and ask them if they can just input this little script to run there depending on how often you want. I want it every minute. You may update your environments every few days, and the report coming every hour will be fine for you. So it's all about figuring out what you want and who can help you get it, and at which point you put the script or whatever tool you use, and where do you keep that information? Once the data grows, I guess some well-performing database. But once you have found a way to get the information about the digest, the SHA-256 of a file or of the Docker image or zip archive, you your horizon is so far that you can barely see it. I'm kind of getting to the point where I told you all I wanted to tell you. Are there any questions or comments? I'm actually going to allow comments. Not that one. Good, that's fine. It's still okay to someone's raising hand? I can't see because there is light. Okay, go on. I'm planning to, I work for a company that works with something like that, but I'm not here to talk about this. I'm not going to be developing that, except I'm going to put it on GitHub, and you can just have a look and do with it whatever you want to do. For now, I just wanted to show you how easy it can become to get all this information that, in this case, that was the information I chose to care about at this point. Like, this is what I want to see. Is my thing running, and when was it running? And if you're more skilled in Bash than I am, I think you have this in an hour or two. If you're like me, you're going to spend a few days and a little bit of Stack Overflow, but then you're going to get there, and then you're going to improve it in a way that works for you. So I don't have plans to develop anything with it. I don't know if Slack is the best communication channel for people here, but I'll try. Oh, maybe you can just find it no, I'm not going to show you now because it's in a private repository that I have to make public first. So let's not look at me fighting against GitHub now. But I'll try to make sure that it's somewhere so you can access it whenever it's made public. I'll put it in the slides, and I'll figure out what's the best way to share the slides. Good. If someone wants to say something, you just have to speak because I can't see most of the room. Well, that's securing the database. You're keeping it in, for example, because whatever I do, in this case, I put it in or read from the database, and then now I run everything on my machine. My Kubernetes cluster is on my machine. As I said before, in the real case scenario, it would be somewhere where I probably don't even have access, but a friendly person from the team maintaining it would put it there. But how to keep it safe? That I think it all depends on your company network, for example. It's I don't have a clear answer to that. Sorry. Yeah, definitely. I would never, what I'm doing here now is a waste of time just typing it up. It should just collect everything on its own, and in a real life scenario, I would have it in GitHub Actions or somewhere. Yeah, but also I was using files that I keep on my local machine, so I couldn't just run it in GitHub and hope it's gonna access my home folder. So that was just, as I said, proof of concept to make it easy. But you put it where it makes more sense for you, and then you keep either the files in some cloud storage, or you use some proper database that gives you better performance for searching and things like that. I don't know, because I prevented them. Yeah, no, I don't really know. I mean, I don't break the production that often. And with my colleagues in my company, we use staging environment, and that's a good way. But I use it, for example, when we implement something. And since we have a couple of environments, and I want to know if it's working, like, oh, we have to make, for example, a real use case API, link to the API documentation available on our in our product. Is it there? Yes, it's there. And then it's not. So I can just see which version is running in staging. I can see which version is running in production and see when was the last deployment to production. And then I can tell, okay, so the artifact was built and published after we deployed to production last time, so it has no right of working there. So the fact I don't see the API key link, API documentation link, doesn't mean we implemented it wrong. It just means that the change didn't reach the production yet. Or if I use the search function, I could just search the information about the artifact built from that commit, and what I did here, right? It's going to tell me that it's not running now, but was running previously. In the case I'm talking about now, it's not running now, and it was not running previously. So it just didn't get to that stage yet. Good. Then you're gonna get extra 20 minutes of free time. Thank you so much.